Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we tackle a bunch of random garden tasks. So let's go. I'm going to keep it real. Black fly season is here. I don't know where you live, but here where I live, around Mother's Day weekend is when the black flies come out. They are horrid. They are horrid. And so I wear a bug netting on my head because I just can't stand the black flies buzzing around my face. Also, if they bite me, especially like around my eyes can swell up. So it's just not fun. I love gardening. I don't like gardening with black flies. So I'm just keeping it real. So all I'm doing right now is I'm coming in and I'm cutting back any of the spent blooms on my daffodils. And then I'm coming in with bulb tone and I'm sprinkling it at the base of my daffodils. This is not something I normally do. I'm trying to be better about taking good care of my spring bulbs when it comes to dividing them, which I am pretty good about, or about fertilizing them. When I did some research, I found that you want to fertilize your spring bulbs either in the spring when they're first coming up or later in the spring when the blooms have gone by. Seeing that the blooms have already gone by, I'm going to go ahead and fertilize it now. And I'm just using the bulb tone and sprinkling it at the base of the plant. And I'm just scratching in the fertilizer at the base of the plant. I know this is silly, but oh my gosh, there are so many black flies. It's the only way I can garden during black fly season. It was my mother-in-law that told me that it's good to remove the spent blooms from your daffodils, because if you don't do that, you're basically telling the plant to put its energy into going to seed. And I mean, I think that does make sense after all. Will they still bloom even if I don't cut them back? Probably, but it just cleans them up, makes them look neater, and it makes me feel good that I'm doing the right thing for my plants. So I'm just going to take a small amount of the bulb tone and sprinkle it. And then I'm scratching it in. The next plant we're working on is pulmonaria or lungwort. It looked really pretty when it was blooming, but a lot of the blooms have already gone by. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to follow each bloom stalk down to the base and cut it. If there are some here that appear to be buds, I'm going to leave them alone. I'm not quite sure if they're going to bloom for me or not, but anything that is very obvious that it's already gone by, I'm following it down and cutting it at the base. I can tell at the bottom here, there are definitely buds. It's a little hard to tell the difference between one that's gone by and one that's a bud, but I can see little bits of color here at the base. That tells me that those are the flower buds. So I'm just following down the ones that have gone by. And this just tells the plant to put its energy into these blooms that are here at the base. Not only that, it also makes for a much cleaner, tidier looking plant. And like I mentioned, it can be a little confusing on what is a bloom that's already gone by and what is a bloom that still needs to come. If you're nervous or you're not sure about it, you can always leave your plant as is. There are a few that are questionable to me. I'm going to leave them. But otherwise, this looks a lot cleaner and a lot neater. And now we can put its energy into the blooms that were at the base here. This flower bed has a bunch of those same daffodils as well as pulmonaria or lungwort. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to complete the task of what I just showed you. I'm going to do the same exact thing when it comes to cutting back and fertilizing. And then I'm going to show you what's next. That job was extremely satisfying. And in some areas, the spring bulbs are a little tight when it comes to the daffodils. And also the other spring bulb that I fertilized when I was in there was the fumewort or corydalis. So in areas where it was kind of hard for me to rake the fertilizer in, I didn't worry about it because we have rain coming and it's going to wash the fertilizer right into the ground, no problem. But I'm walking you around so you can actually see there's quite a few daffodils, and then there are also a lot of the pulmonaria. So I got all of that done, and while I was at it, if I noticed any weeds, I pulled the weeds out as well. And when I was working out here, I started thinking to myself, this is like my house. I tend to go and clean areas of my house that are the cleanest. And the ones that are really, really messy, I just kind of don't want to get to them. And that's basically how I feel right now when it comes to my garden. I'd rather tackle some of the beds that are cleaner and neater and just make them even neater. And on a different day, I can tackle the messy beds. And I forgot I actually have a whole bunch of daffodils in the center there that are around that hydrangea. So I will do the same thing. I will cut back any spent blooms and I'll fertilize them. The next thing we're going to do together though, after I take care of the daffodils, is we're going to plant that spirea that's there. I had a sucker that came from another spirea in my yard. I potted it up and we're going to plant it right there so it can get bigger. I am going to plant this right here. I'm just pulling back the mulch. I have a lot of mulch down here and I don't want to make a mess. So I'm just pulling back the mulch. And also there's drip irrigation in here, so I just need to be careful that I don't hit the drip line. So I'm just peeling everything back, just double checking to see where the irrigation line is, if I find it at all. So far, we're good. I'm not finding it. What I like about spireas is oftentimes you can get free plants at the base of them. And that's where this one came from. And all I'm doing is loosening the roots up at the bottom, just a little bit. And then I want to make sure it's nice and straight. And the soil is very, very wet. If it wasn't wet, I would definitely be adding water into the planting hole. And then after I plant it, I would add more water. But we have more rain coming in a few hours. So no need for me to water. Just putting the mulch back. And then I just want to clean it up. I'm removing any of these dead pieces that are on the top. I find oftentimes with all sorts of spirea, personally, I like to cut back the dead stuff once the plant has leafed out and once it's actually blooming. That way I can see where I need to make my cuts. And that looks so much better. You'll hear me say often in my videos that I'm always looking around at what's blooming and what's not blooming. When I saw that little tiny spirea blooming with its white flowers, I knew a perfect spot would be in this flower bed. We're going to head down to my plant nursery. I have a couple of iris that are blooming and they're shouting to be planted. I love shopping my plant nursery. Let's go ahead and take these and we're going to get them planted in the area that we're working in. I got these sweet iris from a friend of mine who also has a backyard plant nursery. And I only had 2. She might have given me others, but 2 are the ones that bloomed. So that's what we're going to plant today. And next year, if I'm able to divide more off of this, I can do that. My goal is to fill up this whole area here towards the center with iris. I like to put a lot of annuals towards the front here. And many of you know the rule with iris. It's very similar to peonies. You don't want to plant them too deep. If you plant them too deep, then there's a chance they're not going to bloom for you. There are many reasons why an iris might not bloom for you. Could be that they need to be divided, maybe they're not getting enough sun, lots of different reasons. I'm always looking around my yard. I'm always looking for things that are blooming, looking for things that I can move around, things I can divide. I do have an irrigation line right here, so I'm just being mindful of that. Not only do I love this iris because of the yellow color that it's going to add to this flower bed, I also like the fact that it's on the shorter side, which I think will look perfect in this area. Whenever I plant iris, I just like to make sure that the rhizome is exposed. So that's what I'm doing right here. I don't want to cover it too much. Over time, we'll have more yellow iris in this area. For now, we'll settle for 2. There are 2 Stelladoro daylilies there. And then on 2 sides on the inside, between the daylilies, are pulmonaria, or lungwort. And then in the center, there is nothing there. If we head over next door, see the 2 Stelladoro daylilies, and then the 2 clumps of pulmonaria. In the center there is Rudbeckia, or black-eyed Susan. And then the same pattern, there's nothing in the center. And then the same pattern, there's Rudbeckia. What I had done, I believe it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, was I removed a whole clump of Stelladoro daylilies from each of these sections. And then I replaced them with alternating black-eyed Susan. And I alternated them because I knew I wanted to plant something else in those empty spaces. I just didn't know what. I now know what I want to put in those spaces. I showed you in a video recently how beautiful this plant is in the springtime. You hear me talking about it a lot. The yellow colored flower is called leopard's bane. And we had worked on a video recently where we started removing every other leopard's bane that's in this flower bed, which I call the bay window flower bed. And we started putting in some daffodils that we were getting from another area of my yard. Well, I never finished that project, and I want to keep working on the project. What better way to keep working on this project than together we're going to remove some more leopard's bane, and we're going to start putting them over in those empty spots that I showed you. So we left off with a clump of daylilies, a leopard bane, another leopard bane. This one has to be removed. Keep, take out, keep, and then there are a couple of other extra ones hidden over there. So let's get digging and let's get planting. The reason I decided to move this plant into that flower bed is I noticed that there's not a lot of color in that flower bed right now. I always worried that the leopard's bane would clash with my daffodils. What I noticed this year was that the leopard's bane typically blooms well after my daffodils are done blooming. I do have some daffodils that are still blooming that are late bloomers, but not in the flower beds where I'm moving these. And I'm not going to bother dividing this down. It's a nice big clump. We're going to keep it as is. I am trying to take off as much soil as I can. I don't want to leave a hole here. And what will end up going in its place over here is an earlier blooming daffodil. I'll just be dividing the daffodils from other areas of my yard. Just going to pull back some of the mulch that's here. And I'm noticing I have my irrigation line here. So I probably don't want to be planting on this side here because it'd be too close to the lawn. I know I have some bloodroot here. I'll do my best though, just to plant in this general area over here. Unfortunately, the leopard bane roots are not very deep. Do I love having the bloodroot so close to the leopard bane? Not necessarily, but I would prefer to wait a year and see how they play together. For this year, we're just going to leave them as is. I can go ahead and I can now start backfilling. And this leopard's bane is just starting to go by, but you can imagine how pretty it's going to look in this flower bed. When I did a recent garden tour, I had commented on how there was a lot of pink in this flower bed. Well, having this nice pop of yellow, I think will look great. There are quite a few daffodils in this bed, but from what I noticed, the daffodils bloom earlier. And then when the daffodils are done, a lot of pink shows up from the rhododendrons that are in this bed. And you can imagine when the daffodils go by, this will be blooming, and then even the white spirea. And I think those will look really nice. I can get away with moving plants like this, even though they're blooming. We have rain coming tonight. In fact, in a few nights, it's going to be 41 or 42 degrees Fahrenheit. These plants will bounce right back. They might be sad for a day or two, but they'll bounce right back. I'm going to continue shopping my yard. I'm going to keep going over to my bay window bed, pulling out every other leopard's bane, and then putting them in the open spaces that are in here. If I find that I'm running out of leopard's bane, at that point I can start dividing them up. When I'm all done, I'm going to show you how it looks. Okay, so for real, this just makes me so happy. Look at all the pink, there's a little bit of white, and then look at the yellow. And just pretend that over the next many years, those iris are going to multiply. Plus, I think I have extras in my nursery. They just didn't bloom this year. So when they bloom next year, we'll go shopping for them. We have a little pop of yellow now. And tucked back there, we have a little bit of white that eventually that's going to fill in. It's all going to get nice and white in the back. And what we're doing is we're basically preparing for next year. We're giving extra love to our plants that needed a little bit of care after they bloomed so much for us. but then we're also filling in gaps where color is missing. I'm waiting, the peonies will be blooming. There's a lot of other herbaceous perennials that will be blooming, but that's what we were missing. We were just missing a little bit of this yellow. And even if this yellow was to go away tomorrow, if all the blooms were to fade, I am okay with that because now it's here and it's going to put on a great show for next year. I didn't know what I was going to put in those little spaces that I had left blank. And then it occurred to me, I need yellow in my life. This time of year, I need yellow. Not a lot of yellow, just small little pops of yellow. And these small pops of yellow will be large pops of yellow over the next many years. And I love sharing this with you because this is basically how I garden. This is how I think. These are the types of things I look for. And it just makes me happy. And then as we get to the end of the bed, I do want to share a few things down here. So basically, see where the lawn ends and where the gravel begins? That's technically the same bed, but then again, it's technically a different bed. And I have plans for that area. I'll be making a separate video when I tackle this area. I thought about tackling it today, and then I said, no, Vita, stay on task. This will be a whole other different day. Plus, there's a whole bunch of brush in the way, and I need to burn the brush before I can get in there and work. I have at least one more thing I want to do in this bed, and if I get to the second thing, it's a bonus. The first thing is, do you remember the beautiful fumewort that bloomed earlier this season? I'm going to pop it up on the screen so you can see what it looked like. It was so gorgeous when it was blooming. And I had told myself at that time that there was a gap in this bed that needed to be filled with the fumewort. Well, this is what the fumewort is looking like now. It's a spring bulb, and it's starting to go by. It's actually, I believe, starting to set seed, which is exciting because I'm going to see if I can collect the seeds off of it just for fun. But I want to be able to divide and move some pieces of this to the areas that have gaps. So if you follow along with me, you can see that this is what it looks like right here. And I basically have it on the inside of each daffodil patch. Believe me, it's in there. It's just a big mess with a whole bunch of other things growing. So on the inside of each daffodil patch is the fumewort, also known as corydalis. And we're just walking along, and I just want to show you what's going on. And right here, I had mentioned it's usually on the inside of the daffodils. So we have one patch there, and we don't have one there. So technically, we're missing a few patches. If you look over here, this is where that gap begins. And there's a lot. There's quite a few patches. So I'm going to show you my process for what I do. And right here is where that gap ends. So there's a small patch of corydalis right here. So we have quite a bit to do. Let's do one together and then I'll do the rest. In this frame here, I'm pointing to 3 different patches of the fumewort. 2 of the patches are very small, and 1 patch is quite large. That's the patch that we're going to take from, which makes sense. Why not take from a larger patch? And in this instance, I'm going to pull from the back of this patch. I was thinking about this video and what we're doing here, what we're accomplishing together. You know, like when you have the stock market, you invest in the stock market, or when you have children, you invest in your children's future. I kind of feel like what we're doing today is we're investing in next year's garden. All these changes that we're making, quite a few of these changes, we're not going to see the fruits of our labor this year, but we will see the fruits of our labor next year. When it comes to digging out the corydalis, it's very fragile. So just know that you're looking for the bulbs. Sometimes the bulbs will break in the ground, similar to any other spring bulb. And that's okay because that bulb will be fine and it will grow next year. The key though, just like any other spring bulb, is you do want to try to keep the foliage intact because right now the foliage is feeding the bulbs and putting energy into it for next year. And this gives you an idea of what the bulbs look like of corydalis. They're pretty big actually. And when it comes to depth, we just want to make sure we're getting the bulb underground as well as this light colored piece right here where it's like a white color or cream color. And then as soon as the leaves start, that's going to be above soil level. So the pattern that I have in my flower beds is I basically have the corydalis on either side of the daffodil. So I'm going to have a patch on this side, I'll have a patch on the other side. The way I look at it is, yes, there is weeding to be done, there are annuals to be planted, fertilizing to be done, all sorts of jobs in the garden. But these investments into next year's future, certain things like planting these spring bulbs, they need to be done now, because what will happen is this corydalis, these leaves, will go dormant. They will die back. And then I'm not going to remember where all these bulbs are. And the reality is I'm not going to get to moving all the spring bulbs that I had intended to do this year. That is totally fine. As long as I feel like I've done a little bit of what I wanted to do, I am perfectly happy. And I'm happy to show you my process for doing it. Teachable moment time. This is fumewort or corydalis. See the two bulbs? They're connected together. And to divide them, you just pull them apart like that. And I didn't mention it before, but when I place them in the hole, I am trying to place them further apart from each other. When I showed you the example earlier, I just plunked them in the hole. But I typically like to divide my bulbs because if I'm going to be digging them out, I might as well divide them. And then I like to space them out a little bit so they have room to grow. And here's another one. You can see that the roots are shared. And I'm just going to go in and pull them apart like that. And then I'm going to backfill. I can definitely tell that the foliage on these is near the end. So even if I was to cut all the foliage off now, it would be okay because they were definitely starting to turn yellow. But for right now, I'm going to leave them. And in a couple of weeks, when they're really yellow, I'll come in and I'll just cut off the foliage, just like you would with any other spring bulb like a daffodil. Time for us to look at the fruits of our labor. So we got the spirea or bridal wreath installed. We also added in 2 yellow iris for that nice pop of yellow color. As a bonus, I added a couple of fumewort in this area. I wasn't going to, but I thought, why not? It just brings the rest of the bed together by having it wrap around. And in fact, when people come up my driveway, this is what they notice. So they'll see the pink, and then they'll follow the bed and continue to see the pink. And then as we followed the bed along, I added some more fumewort. You can see where the soil's been disturbed. That's where I added the fumewort. We have the beautiful pops of yellow color now from the leopard's bane. And I tried not to steal too much of the fumewort whenever I took it from different areas within this bed. But I really am just loving how everything's looking. And this is where there was a big gap of the fumewort, and there shouldn't be next year. And when you're doing this type of planting this time of year, it's really faith in gardening. And I say that a lot. You have to have faith when you garden. We'll find out next year how the placement was, but I don't expect it to be perfect. It doesn't need to be exactly perfect in terms of spacing. The big thing is now there's no big gap when it comes to that beautiful pink flower. And not only that, now we can really enjoy looking at a little bit of yellow in this bed because it needs that little pop of color. I'm so thrilled that we got this done today. I absolutely love how it came out. Those black flies tried to get me, but they couldn't get me. They are vicious, let me tell you. But we got a lot done and I am thrilled about it. I really am. You know, with the weather, we've had a lot of rain lately. I can garden out in the rain. It's not a problem. It's those black flies that get me, but not with the net. Yeah, if you live in an area like I do, definitely invest in one of these. They're a lifesaver. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I am very happy with all that we got done today. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.